In the year 2001, I wonder though, what sort of a life would it be like in social terms? I mean, if our whole life is built around the computer, do we become a computer-dependent society and computer-dependent individuals?
In some ways, but they'll also enrich our society because it'll make it possible for us to live really anywhere we like. Any businessman and executive could live almost anywhere on Earth and still do his business through a device like this. And this is a wonderful thing. It means we wanted to be stuck in cities, we better live out in the country or wherever we please.
Broadcasting from Brisbane, Australia, this is The FOMO Show.
I'm Matt.
I'm Joe.
And this is a fortnightly podcast where we talk about the exciting ideas changing the world today and what might change the world tomorrow.
We'll help you stay across what's going on so you don't get the fear of missing out.
You can find us at FOMO.show or by searching for The FOMO Show on your platform of choice.
Everything in the show is in the show notes. You can find links to the stuff we're talking about and timestamps to the relevant parts, so you can always skip ahead or find it later. So this episode, we're going to be covering a bunch of news. There are a few different really cool things that have been coming out recently. We're going to be running through that.
We're also going to be highlighting one of the most interesting games, which I've been playing recently. And yeah, you'll find out more when we talk about it.
And it's still not fully released yet.
No, nowhere near. But it's already blowing my mind.
And in our privacy and security section, we're going to be covering camera covers.
Yeah, it'll just be a really simple tip for privacy and security this week.
Hey, so what have you been up to the last couple of weeks?
Well, I finally finished the AA Bill article, which I've been working on. We covered the AA Bill, which is Australia's new surveillance law, which basically affects everyone in the world. I recently, and we covered that back in episode 34, and I said there's an article coming. It took me a little bit longer than I thought it would, but finally got it out. So it ended up being about a 35-minute read. I think that's what Medium told me it was, about a 35-minute read. But it goes into the Assistance and Access Bill in a lot more depth than what we went into on the podcast.
Yeah.
I've also been playing Star Citizen, which we'll talk about a little bit later in the show. It's insane.
It's a technologically massively impressive game.
Completely crowdfunded too. It's just gotten to the point now where it's really starting to be very playable and incredible in its scope. So,
and even if you're not into gaming, it's going to be worth a listen because there's a lot of really cool little things in there.
Tech generally leads through gaming first and then trickles down to everything else. So yeah, we'll talk about all that later on. But that's what I've been up to. So what have you been up to?
I've been working. I've finished moving house. I still haven't got internet. It's been 1 week, 2 days, 3 hours. But you know, I'm still here. Yeah, I need internet so hard, man. But this week's edit will probably be quite quick because there'll be no distractions.
Yeah. Have you been tethering off your phone?
I have indeed. I've re-topped up my phone because I'm on pay-as-you-go. I'm now being taken to the bank for using all my data. So, yeah. That's me, yeah. And then just working. So, yeah, been good.
Yeah, good. Little quick bit of disclosure. This podcast is not investment or any other type of advice.
We're not saying you should buy anything at all.
Yeah, so full disclosure, we're both personally invested in different shares, funds, cryptocurrencies, some of which we talk about on this show. But if we talk about any type of investment, it doesn't mean that you should buy into it.
So do your research, never invest more than you can afford to lose, and most of all, avoid the fear of missing out.
So if you're new around here and new to blockchain and cryptocurrency, you can check out our Blockchain Basics series. It starts from episode 2 and continues on until about episode 8.
It'll give you some grounding in the fundamentals and help you understand what on earth we're talking about. Right, let's jump into the news.
Cool. So first piece in the news, zoom and focus. They're two familiar video features that we all take for granted, but Nokia are trying to bring these things to the audio world.
Yeah, so imagine taking photos or videos without the ability to zoom or focus. Now, Nokia says that audio recording should have the same tools.
Yeah, so the product was demonstrated at this year's CES, so the Consumer Electronics Show.
Yeah.
In Las Vegas. It's expected to be available for their smartphones later this year.
So this is software which it uses the two microphones on your phone, and the software needs to know the exact location of these microphones in 3D space. And so it's not for audio after the event. It's when you're recording audio, you can tap on a part of the scene like a moving object or something that's there, and it will record the audio from that space by sort of like triangulating. I guess you call it biangulating or whatever, with the two microphones.
Yeah.
So yeah, it can follow things around. Now, I think it originally came from like a 360 camera project that Nokia started, but they dropped the camera, but they kept this audio software. So yeah.
Yes, they've
cool.
said that the technology will be quietly moving into mobile devices from other manufacturers this year as well. So it won't just be limited to Nokia, but it's pretty incredible technology when you think about it. The fact that you can hone in on a certain part of a scene and say, I just want audio from there.
Yeah.
And you can get it.
Crazy.
Yeah,
absolutely crazy. So yeah, you could zoom in on a particular sound like a bird singing or someone talking. So, sitting in a cafe and you want to snoop on a conversation, you disgust me, but that's awesome.
Yeah, and I guess you could also look at it from, let's say you're filming a podcast like we do, but you've got video as well, and you might have an interview with 4 or 5 people there in the room. You might just be able to select the different parts of the room you want the sounds to come from at different points instead of having to edit everything out. There's a lot of use cases for it that we probably don't even really think about yet, but will probably come to fruition.
When you listen to a lot of these big YouTube channels, when they're giving tips on how they make their YouTube channel, the consistent theme is you can have the best video in the world, but if your audio isn't good, the whole thing, people quit.
Yeah.
And so getting the audio right is actually really important. And Nokia are picking a space that not many people are really looking at.
No, it's something that people hadn't really thought about, I guess, outside maybe the intelligence world. It's not really anything you'd normally think about. And I can see the technology being used in a number of other ways down the track. So I don't think it'll just be limited to smartphones. I think down the line we'll probably be pairing this to other types of cameras and hooking them in with microphones, and I can see it being used pretty widely.
Wow, yeah. Really powerful, really cool. So yeah, there's that.
So next bit of news, IBM has revealed its first commercial quantum computer.
So CES, lots of news came out of this conference.
This is one of our favourite times of the year. Yeah.
Oh mate, well, but yeah, IBM revealed their first commercially available quantum computer. It's a 20 qubit hybrid system capable of quantum and conventional computing operations.
So if you remember back in May of 2016, IBM announced a 5 qubit system, and in 2017 they unveiled a 17 qubit system and announced a working 50 qubit system. So this new release isn't really as powerful as what they have access to internally, but that's generally the case when you take something from internal testing where you can control everything and you can make it as big as you want, to commercial where you have to package it up and give it to clients and put it out in the wild.
So it's not just a quantum computer, so you don't have to be it's not just for extreme mathematicians. It also works together like as a classical regular computer as well. So it's aimed at academic or business applications. So pharmaceuticals for discovering drugs, or AI developers or insurers, things like that. And yeah, it's allowed outside of their facility. If you look at it, looks really, really cool. I think they actually got so there's a description on how it looks, and how dope does this sound?
Yeah, so it says the main computer is housed within a 9-foot tall, 9-foot wide case of half-inch thick borosilicate glass, forming a sealed, airtight enclosure which has been designed by leading design firms including Milan-based Gopion. But the housing is not only about design. The casing is vital to the quantum operation, where cryogenic engineering is required to deliver a continuous cold and isolated quantum environment. Within the device, high-precision electronics in compact compact form work to tightly control large numbers of qubits.
Yeah, so other tech firms are developing quantum computers as well. Intel is working on a 49 qubit chip. Google's designing a 72 qubit system. This is according to TechCrunch. And Microsoft is hoping to create a topological quantum computer. Not that I have any idea what that means. Topological, isn't that mapping or something?
Yeah, it is mapping, yeah. So I'm not sure. Things get really weird with quantum, and it's probably a good time. This all sounds really cool, but it is probably good for us to step back for a second and discuss what the big deal is with quantum computing. And I do believe we touched on it way back in a very early episode, but we've got a description from TechCrunch, which is quite good.
Yeah, so they said that the quantum computer is entirely different from regular computers, and the reason it's quantum is that it doesn't use binary logic. By its nature, a quantum computer is a yes, no, or both device. So when you're a developer and you make a logical choice, you're not limited by if this, then that. You can actually do if this, then that, or both, which leads to a massive number of possibilities and makes all the difference in the world when it comes to calculations. Yeah,
so there's several instances where binary computers can't really solve problems the way we'd like to. When asked to solve a problem where every answer is equally likely, a binary computer has to take the time to individually assess each possibility. So it's like when you're at a restaurant. Let's say you've gone to a really expensive restaurant and you're having a 7-course meal. Mm-hmm. That meal wouldn't come out to you all at the same time. You know, you get one at a time. So they'd say, here's your entree, here's your starter, here's your main, here's your dessert, here's your blah, blah, blah. 7 different meals. But a quantum, and that's kind of like what a binary computer's like. You have to investigate each and every possibility one after another, and you kind of run down the run sheet of different types of programs. But with a quantum computer, it's kind of like you're at a restaurant and they say, we're going to bring it all out to you at the same time. A quantum computer would look at a really long program, which might take a binary computer 30 minutes to process, and it would say, well, I can process this all at the same time.
Wow.
Which is really powerful.
That's crazy. There are a few different applications that are being looked at. I mean, there's the quantum internet of the future being built with Chinese researchers. Now, there were recent breakthroughs, like in 2017, I think. There was the first ever space-based video call secured by quantum encryption, which is pretty crazy. Yeah, the scary flip side is that theoretically, a quantum computer could crack 128-bit encryption almost instantly if it was given the same resources of computing power as a binary system, for example. So it's incredibly powerful in its complexity.
The best way to look at the change quantum computing represents, TechCrunch says, is to compare it to binary computing in the exact same way you would compare the iPhone X's capabilities with those of a Timex calculator watch from the 1980s.
Apparently, at 100 qubits, a single quantum computer processor would theoretically be more powerful than all the supercomputers in the planet combined.
One of the biggest takeaways from quantum computing in what's been talked about for the last couple of years and what it can do is that it potentially creates some huge security risks. Because what they say is, well, you can take these classical encryption mechanisms we have, like 128-bit, 256-bit, and there's different algorithms that run that. And the reason they're so good is because with a binary computer system, you have to run through all the different permutations one after another. And so it might take you, I don't know, millions and millions of years to successfully crack a 256-bit encrypted system, just brute forcing it. But with a quantum computer, because you can look at all the possibilities at the exact same time, as you've got enough power, you can almost instantly find the solution and away you go.
So it's the keys to the castle.
It really is. Yeah.
So I guess that in a sense for cryptography means that cryptographic protocols or cryptographic methods probably, like, they're not cheap to come up with, and they're very, very smart people who do it, but it sounds like there's actually a need to get even stronger encryption.
Yeah, and we don't really know what that will look like, because if you have to encrypt something using a quantum computer, what's the process for that? You know, what algorithm do you use? Can you even come up with an algorithm that can be the shield against the quantum computer's sword? Or does it just mean that encryption's done for? These are questions that no one really knows the answer to, and 10 years ago or even 5 years ago, it was just theory. You know, people were like, oh, well, sometime off in the distance, we'll have to deal with that problem. But it was kind of assumed that it might be 20 years, 30 years. But Google, IBM, Microsoft, they're all pushing for this as much as they possibly can. And it may be that we have to ask these questions in 2 years.
Is that power already available?
Yeah, well, that's the thing, we don't know. And then you look at cryptocurrency, and you have, because Bitcoin's secured with, I think, a 256, SHA-256, and there's some other algorithm that, one's the hashing algorithm, the other one's the actual security algorithm, and I can't remember which is which off the top of my head. But there's a real fear there that these quantum computers may be able to start reverse engineering private keys from the public keys that are facing the net. And then if they can do that, then what's the value of the network would basically drop to zero. If it can be breached and anyone's private key can be reverse engineered, then no one's safe, and you could quite easily target the main addresses and get their private keys and empty their wallet.
Sheesh. So for the time being, I guess quantum computers would be applied against military encryption.
Yep.
Give it a small amount of time, and the fact that you can rent some time off IBM's. I think you get a second a day for free or something of quantum computing power.
Yeah.
Give it time.
Which doesn't sound like much, but if you're talking about quantum computing,
right,
it could be all you need with the right level of power.
It's quite scary, really. I feel like I should just become a neo-Luddite and just move to the woods. You know, no, there are too many snakes in the woods and stuff here, man. Oh, I can't even go to the woods anymore. Hey, you found this piece on physics, phys.org. Artificial intelligence detects the presence of viruses.
So to understand it, you really have to understand how this concept called biosensing works, and we'll try and make this as least dense as possible. So the article says that many biosensing applications rely on characterization of specific analytes such as proteins, viruses, bacteria, among many other targets, which can be accomplished using micro or nanoscale particles.
Basically, the particles on these like proteins, viruses, and bacteria, they're coated with a surface chemistry. So they form clusters, and the higher the concentration of these particles are, the larger the number of clusters. So if you monitor and characterize these clusters, it can tell you if that particle is present in a sample and in what kind of concentration on a very simple level.
Yeah. And current methods which kind of analyze these things are limited because they're either only capable of a coarse readout or rely on really expensive and bulky microscopes. So they have to be done in a very specialized lab, essentially.
So UCLA researchers have come to the rescue, and they've developed a rapid and automated biosensing method based on holography. So that's a photographic recording of a light field. And they've coupled that with deep learning.
So in this system, all the particle clusters and individual microparticles, they image them on in 3D as holograms all at the same time, and they cover a really large sample area. So in this system, everything's imaged in 3D as holograms all at the same time, and it's imaged in a really large area as well. And they actually say it's about 10 times larger than the imaging area of a standard optical microscope. So they're able to get a way bigger sample size.
And after that, a trained deep neural network processes these holograms, and it rapidly reconstructs them into images of those clusters, similar to what you could get with a regular scanning microscope, like really expensive, doing this faster and for a much larger sample volume.
So during all that, all those particle clusters at the micro scale are automatically counted with a sensitivity similar to a laboratory grade microscope. So you're essentially getting the best or even better of both previous worlds.
Yeah, they made a proof of concept, and they successfully demonstrated the application of that to detect herpes simplex virus, HSV, and they achieved a detection limit of about 5 viruses per microliter, which provides what they say is a clinically relevant level of sensitivity for HSV detection.
Yeah, and HSV is one of the most widespread viral infections, and it's estimated to have affected more than 50% of the adults in the US. But if you've ever seen these, if you ever get a blood test or anything, they'll generally give you a whole bunch of different test results, and they'll have these like microliter markers on them, and generally they'll have to spend a whole bunch of time looking at this stuff. They're not that accurate, they're very expensive, but this is just, it's not just limited to HSV, obviously. It's a proof of concept demonstrating that they've found a way to rapidly image and scan for a lot of these diseases in a far wider, broader, and easier way than they've previously done, which could have some really, really big consequences. So you can imagine the benefits. I mean, if they could, for example, commercialize these sensors, put them in somewhere in a city, and you could, I don't know, pay a micro payment while you walk under it to have it read you for potential cancers. Or you can go to a doctor and you could get a virtual checkup from their imaging machine, get an automatic diagnosis, and only if something's wrong would you need to actually go in and see the doctor.
Ah.
So next bit of news, Earth's magnetic field is acting up and geologists don't know why.
So yeah, a Slashdot user quoted a piece from Nature which said something strange is going on at the top of the world. Earth's north magnetic pole has been skittering away from Canada and towards Siberia, driven by liquid iron sloshing within the planet's core. Now, the magnetic pole is moving so quickly that it's forced the world's geomagnetism experts into a rare move.
The geomagnetic experts are set to update the world magnetic model, which describes the planet's magnetic field and underlies all modern navigation, from the systems that see ships at sea to Google Maps on smartphones. So the most recent version of the model came out in 2015 and was supposed to last until 2020, but the magnetic field is changing so rapidly now that researchers have said, well, we have to fix this or everything's going to be thrown completely out of whack.
And they said that, yeah, the error is increasing all the time. And yeah, by early 2018, the model was actually in trouble. And yeah, they've been doing an annual check, realized it was so inaccurate that it was about to exceed the acceptable limit for navigational errors.
Yeah, so I mean, there wasn't a lot of guidance in this article on what's actually causing it to shift so rapidly, apart from the fact that it's liquid metal sloshing around in the world. But it's so funny because you go to school and you hear the teacher talk about the North Pole and the South Pole, and in your head you just picture like a real pole. It's like stuck in the ground. It's like, this is it, this is the North Pole, the South Pole. But it's incredible that it can move, and it can move so rapidly to the extent that they actually have to say, okay, everyone, this is getting dangerous if we don't update this. So we need to update the entire model, because it's not just like keeping track of where the pole is. There's a whole bunch of systems and algorithms that are built on this.
It's kind of interesting there's a whole lot of stuff that's going on that we have no idea about how it works. Wow. And it's right underneath us.
Yeah, and I mean, imagine having to build this algorithm too, because you wouldn't just be able to go and say, okay, we need you to build this, what do they call it? The world magnetic model. You wouldn't just be able to go to a developer and say, we need you to build this model and here's north. You'd have to say, okay, so we need you to build this model, but you need to account for the fact that magnetic north could shift by like hundreds of kilometers in a few years. And you need to make sure that all of our navigation still works and works well.
Magnets are one of the coolest things that you wonder how they discovered these things. Like someone floats a piece of iron on a log and it just keeps rotating the log or something, and then they're like, it keeps pointing the same way, and then no matter if we go to the other side of the country and try the same, it's crazy.
Yeah, it's incredible that something so far away, I mean, on a galactic scale, it's basically right next door. But for us here on Earth, something that's so far away, we're sitting here in Australia right now, but something that's way up the top of the Earth or way down the bottom of the Earth can move a piece of metal that we have like in a little compass here, like thousands of kilometers away. Yeah.
And if you think we discovered that by accident, what else is there we haven't discovered yet?
That's right.
We got fire, we got magnets. What's next? Subscribe to the FOMO Show. We have no idea either. This is really, really cool. Delivery drones are using bird-inspired legs to jump into the air.
Yes, this is a piece out of Spectrum, and a South African startup called Passerine has an interesting idea, which is to do what birds do: use wings to fly efficiently while relying on legs and feet for takeoff and landing of drones.
So there are some pictures in the article which are worth checking out, because it's sort of like it's like a small cargo plane, sort of tipped back a little bit, but the wing is on top of the craft, and then the engines are on top of the wing, which is an unusual sort of mechanism. But look at the pictures. And then there are these bird-like legs.
Because it doesn't look like a normal drone, does it? Like most drones you see are kind of the helicopter style. They got the propellers, they're on the side. This is more like a UAV.
Yeah.
You see UAVs before that the military uses.
Yeah.
It's kind of looks a bit more like a real plane.
And so it's a fixed-wing drone. And these over-wing engines create what's called a blown wing, where the engine exhaust passes over the top of the wing and over a portion of the wing flap. So the forced high-speed air generates a massive amount of lift, 2 or 3 times the lift of a conventional wing. And since the air is coming directly from the engines, you get the lift even if the aircraft isn't moving very much. So what that means is that you can jump up with these legs and then put a massive amount of draft. So you don't actually need a long runway.
Yeah.
Which is actually really a cool idea.
So it's a lot closer to like a vertical takeoff and landing then. So the blown wings that the drone has can't lift the aircraft off the ground by themselves, which is where the legs come in. So you can think of the legs sort of like self-contained and reusable catapult system that the drone carries with it. So they're spring-loaded and they provide the majority, about 80% of the energy required for takeoff.
Wow. And then, after takeoff, they retract into the fairings so they don't cause drag. And it flies just like any other fixed-wing aircraft. And once it gets to the destination, the legs are used in reverse. So it slows down. The drone slows as much as possible, extends its leg. Wow. And then, after takeoff, they retract into the fairings so they don't cause drag. And flies just like any other fixed-wing aircraft. And once it gets to the destination, the legs are used in reverse. So it slows down. The drone slows as much as possible, extends its legs, and then uses them as shock absorbers.
Wow. So what this means is that you can have all the advantages of a fixed-wing drone, which is payload, speed, range, and efficiency, along with the pinpoint landing capabilities of rotorcraft, which is like the drones that we see around, the commercial drones. But you don't have to compromise with some sort of hybrid design. So the Sparrow can't hover like a rotorcraft does, which is a slight limitation on the missions it's able to perform. So it might be ideal for camera work, for example, but that's okay because they've got their eye on deliveries, really. That's the thing they're targeting, all these different deliveries, especially with that, what Amazon is starting to do with their delivery system. And the big thing about those deliveries is that the rotorcraft, which they're using now, don't have a very long range, they don't have a big payload, and they don't have great speeds, but what this can do is it will allow a lot bigger payload, range, and speed, but it'll be able to take off and land on a lot less than a conventional drone.
Now, this is really interesting because when I was driving across Australia, I was chatting with my girlfriend who was in the car, and we were talking about how it would be really cool to get drones for the remote post offices, so they could get post out faster to these remote places. I say remote, these country places in Australia. I was thinking, and we were chatting, what do you get? Do you get a drone that has to sort of land on the regular roads or something like that, and then you need a bit of takeoff, and then you could take all the parcels and it wouldn't cost too much, but then something like this actually solves all the problems, because we're thinking like, how many of these places are actually going to have a runway or amount of road that you could take off and land on? You could actually land in the on the back of the post office. And you'd be using a lot less fuel than the trucks they send out there or the cars. They can operate autonomously. And it reminds me as well of, there was an article, I can't remember whether we mentioned it on the podcast or not, but there was an article about 1.5 years ago by a guy named Nathan Waters, I think, and he wrote this article about a city of the future, essentially. You remember this? And he was talking about how you could have these shipping containers, and they could run around on electronic drivetrains, and they'd pick you up from the airport, and it'd be a self-contained hotel, and it could just automatically take you to
a beach resort somewhere, and the beach resort would be essentially like a Lego. It'd be just a big frame that picks up these containers and drops them into the view. Incredible article. But in that article, he talked about the fact that while you're driving, sitting in your little self-contained hotel, relaxing after you got off your flight, and it's taking you to your destination, it could have a little... That kind of thing probably seemed a lot further away, because these rotorcraft just don't have that much distance and they can't carry a lot. But this, I can see why these guys are targeting delivery drones so much, because that kind of stuff probably isn't too far away either. And it means that they can match speed, they can do all sorts of different things, and they'll have a lot more range. They'll be able to land a lot more flexibly, but then take off again too, pretty much straight away. So,
that's the thing, is as if logistics are just moving to heavy objects. Post is like letters are going to be less, parcels are going to be more. It's just it's really cool.
And they go 24/7 too. That's the thing about drones. It's not post. You can only have it. Your human driver has to drive it at a certain time. There's all sorts of restrictions, but these drones can operate very autonomously. They run on GPS. I can't see a future where we don't have a bunch of these in our skies in the next 5 or 10 years, just doing a whole bunch of the tasks that we do, because there's more room in the air.
It's true. It's true. Yeah.
Currently, everything has to go by road, and it gets caught up by traffic and blah blah blah. But there's more room in the air.
I want to see some field testing. Matt and I are going to watch the video of a takeoff. It's 12 seconds. It's in the article. Check it out. If you're not sold before, have a look at it, and it really shows how powerful this actually can be.
Dude, that's like a frog.
Yeah, it is exactly like a frog. Imagine a frog. It jumps and then it just goes boom.
Yeah, it basically catapults itself forward and up.
Yeah,
and then the motor just takes over. That's incredible.
Man, it's just...
We're now watching it slowed down.
YouTube having slow motion is great. Jump, lean. Oof. So I guess you need to load it properly and make sure it was balanced out with balance your parcels out and stuff, but with enough testing, that's indoors, and then there's wind to account for and all that, but it will get better. So Marriot's data breach that we talked about a few episodes ago may be the biggest in history, and now they're facing multiple class action lawsuits.
So Marriot's being sued for allegedly failing to protect more than 300 million guests' information from hackers. So more than 150 people who previously stayed in Marriott properties are suing the hotel chain in a federal class action lawsuit, claiming that Marriott didn't do enough to protect them from a data breach that exposed all their personal information, including names, credit card information, and passport numbers. And if you remember from the previous piece, this breach actually occurred before Marriott even acquired the Starwood hotels, which is where the breach came from. And it started 2 years before, but when they bought the business, they didn't do any of their due diligence in checking the systems, getting a security audit of the Starwood systems. And so the hackers actually stayed in there for another 2 years. So they were in the system 4 years in total, pulled pretty much all the information they possibly could out of it. And it's one of the biggest breaches there's ever been in history.
And to think that this is probably just some guy or girl somewhere in some country. It's probably not some big organised group. Someone just exploited it and they sat on it.
They sat on it. It doesn't seem like it was that hard for them either to sit on it.
So this class action suit claims that Marriott failed to provide timely, accurate and adequate notice to the guests whose information had been obtained, because they'd first disclosed they'd been hacked on November the 30th, but they'd been there a while, and they apparently began investigating it in September and didn't announce it till December.
Yeah, and this is a common trend we're seeing with a lot of these companies where they find out about these breaches and then they sit on it. They don't tell anyone, and it can go for any number of months. There's a number of breaches which haven't been talked about for almost a year after the companies found out about it. But Equifax recently, they're having some issues of their own, some of the executives, because they suspiciously sold their shares, and it's turned out now that they were guilty of insider trading, or they probably will be found guilty of insider trading because they sold their shares a few days before the announcement came out that they'd been hacked.
But yeah, hackers obtained unencrypted passport numbers of 5.25 million guests And all you need to do is tie that up with their name and
That's right.
username and passwords and all that, as well as 20.3 million encrypted ones. So at least they were using some form of encryption. Encrypted debit and credit card numbers were exposed, and but it's a pretty big thing. But cybersecurity experts are saying that the hospitality industry is a low-hanging fruit for these hackers because of their lax security policies.
Yeah, and it's very hard to register for hotels or anything in hospitality really without. They seem to require a lot of information from you they don't really need, and I've found this because I never give my name where I don't have to all of these places. In some places I get away with it fine, but other places they'll say, no, we need your license or we need your passport or blah blah blah, and there's no need for them to have any of that data, but it's just a part of their process. And I think hopefully this will begin to change some of that, and they sold their shares a few days before the announcement came out that they'd been hacked.
But hackers obtained unencrypted passport numbers of 5.25 million guests, and all you need to do is tie that up with their name and
That's right.
username and passwords and all that, as well as 20.3 million encrypted ones. So at least they were using some form of encryption. Encrypted debit and credit card numbers were exposed, and but it's a pretty big thing. But cybersecurity experts are saying that the hospitality industry is a low-hanging fruit for these hackers because of their lax security policies.
Yeah, and it's very hard to they sold their shares a few days before the announcement came out that they'd been hacked.
But hackers obtained unencrypted passport numbers of 5.
They sold their shares a few days before the announcement came out that they'd been hacked.
But hackers obtained unencrypted passport numbers of 5.25 million guests, and all you need to do is tie that up with their name and
That's right.
username and passwords and all that, as well as 20.3 million encrypted ones. So at least they were using some form of encryption. Encrypted debit and credit card numbers were exposed, and but it's a pretty big thing. But cybersecurity experts are saying that the hospitality industry is a low-hanging fruit for these hackers because of their lax security policies.
Yeah, and it's very hard to register for hotels or anything in hospitality really without. They seem to require a lot of information from you they don't really need, and I've found this because I never give my name where I don't have to all of these places. In some places I get away with it fine, but other places they'll say, no, we need your license or we need your passport or blah blah blah, and there's no need for them to have any of that data, but it's just a part of their process. And I think hopefully this will begin to change some of that, and they'll talk to their lawyers or their cybersecurity firms and they'll say, guys, why are you asking for this stuff? You don't need it. You don't need their passport.
I mean, even it's like if you're signing up for a free ebook, just give them a guerrilla mail or a throwaway email address, and then if that doesn't work, then maybe you'll need to actually give them an actual thing. But
I've never been called out on that kind of stuff once for giving fake names. Like, I think there's this little inbuilt part of us, I don't know if it's from our schooling or what it's from, but when you see a form and it's got first name, last name and email, the first time you ever go to put a name that isn't your own in there, it's like in your head you're thinking that, I don't know, a hand's going to reach through the screen and slap you, or the police are going to rock up at your door and knock on the door and say, sir, we've got reports that you gave a fake name for an ebook sign up. It's just not going to happen, and you don't need to be putting that kind of information out on the internet where it's probably going to be breached, and people can use that. If they get that information, they can use that against you.
So I guess you have to do a bit of mental gymnastics and be like, don't give me my real name. But then if you're using something like Chrome, which you shouldn't use, it will save your first name, last name, all these preferences. So once you've put Testy McTestison of Testville, Taiwan, postcode 11011, every time you start filling out a form, it will just suggest, why don't you be just Testy McTestison? Which is, funnily enough, the one that I
So
use.
if you want to find Joe, look up on Have I Been Pwned for Texting McTestison.
That's the one.
But speaking of Have I Been Pwned and data breaches, there was a massive dump I think it was last week, where nearly 773 million email accounts were exposed in a massive data breach.
It was known as Collection 1, and apparently the data didn't come from a single source or site or company, but it's an aggregation of cracked passwords and, well, that includes cracked passwords. So you can check if you've been affected on haveibeenpwned.com, and pwned spelled Pwned.
So yeah, if you go over to Have I Been Pwned and you find that you have been breached, and look, it's likely that you have. A couple of my old accounts were even in there, and they don't really have a lot of information about where a lot of this stuff is attributed to yet. So it'll generally just say it's come from this part of the dump or that part of the dump. Yeah, look, if you use the same password for most things, and especially if that password involves your bank account or your credit card or any account that's important to you, go to Have I Been Pwned, check it out, and really worth changing all your passwords.
Interesting, there's a tab on the website of Have I Been Pwned called Passwords. So you can actually type in, your commonly used passwords, and if one has been seen on one of these databases, it'll suggest that you'd better try a different password.
They sold their shares a few days before the announcement came out that they'd been hacked.
But yeah, hackers obtained unencrypted passport numbers of 5.25 million guests, and all you need to do is tie that up with their name and
that's right,
username and passwords and all that, as well as 20.3 million encrypted ones. So at least they were using some form of encryption. Encrypted debit and credit card numbers were exposed, and but yeah, it's a pretty big thing. But yeah, cybersecurity experts are saying that the hospitality industry is a low-hanging fruit for these hackers because of their lax security policies.
Yeah, and it's very hard to register for hotels or anything in hospitality really without. They seem to require a lot of information from you they don't really need. And I've found this because I never give my name where I don't have to all of these places. In some places I'd get away with it fine, but other places they'll say, no, we need your license or we need your passport or blah, blah, blah. And there's no need for them to have any of that data, but it's just a part of their process. And I think hopefully this will begin to change some of that, and they'll talk to their lawyers or their cybersecurity firms and they'll say, guys, why are you asking for this stuff? You don't need it. You don't need their passport.
I mean, even it's like if you're signing up for a free ebook, just give them a guerrilla mail or a throwaway email address, and then if that doesn't work, then maybe you'll need to actually give them an actual thing. But yeah.
But I've never been called out on that kind of stuff once for giving fake names. Like, I think there's this little inbuilt part of us, I don't know if it's from our schooling or what it's from, but when you see a form and it's got first name, last name and email, the first time you ever go to put a name that isn't your own in there, it's like in your head you're thinking that, I don't know, a hand's going to reach through the screen and slap you, or the police are going to rock up at your door and knock on the door and say, sir, we've got reports that you gave a fake name for an ebook sign up. It's just not going to happen, and you don't need to be putting that kind of information out on the internet where it's probably going to be breached, and people can use that. If they get that information, they can use that against you.
So I guess you have to do a bit of mental gymnastics and be like, don't give me my real name. But then if you're using something like Chrome, which you shouldn't use, it will save your first name, last name, all these preferences. So once you've put Testy McTestison of Testville, Taiwan, postcode 11011, every time you start filling out a form, it will just suggest, why don't you be just Testy McTestison? Which is, funnily enough, the one that I use.
So if you want to find Joe, look up on Have I Been Pwned for Testy McTestison.
That's the one.
But speaking of Have I Been Pwned and data breaches, there was a massive dump I think it was last week, where nearly 773 million email accounts were exposed in a massive data breach.
It was known as Collection 1, and apparently the data didn't come from a single source or site or company, but it's an aggregation of cracked passwords and, well, that includes cracked passwords. So you can check if you've been affected on haveibeenpwned.com, and pwned spelled Pwned.
So yeah, if you go over to Have I Been Pwned and you find that you have been breached, and look, it's likely that you have. A couple of my old accounts were even in there, and they don't really have a lot of information about where a lot of this stuff is attributed to yet. So it'll generally just say it's come from this part of the dump or that part of the dump. Yeah, look, if you use the same password for most things, and especially if that password involves your bank account or your credit card or any account that's important to you, go to Have I Been Pwned, check it out, and really worth changing all your passwords.
Interesting. There's a tab on the website of Have I Been Pwned called Passwords, so you can actually type in your commonly used passwords, and if one has been seen on one of these databases, it'll suggest that you'd better try a different password.
They sold their shares a few days before the announcement came out that they'd been hacked.
But yeah, hackers obtained unencrypted passport numbers of 5.25 million guests, and all you need to do is tie that up with their name and
that's right,
username and passwords and all that, as well as 20.3 million encrypted ones. So at least they were using some form of encryption. Encrypted debit and credit card numbers were exposed, and but yeah, it's a pretty big thing. But yeah, cybersecurity experts are saying that the hospitality industry is a low-hanging fruit for these hackers because of their lax security policies.
Yeah, and it's very hard to register for hotels or anything in hospitality really without. They seem to require a lot of information from you they don't really need. And I've found this because I never give my name where I don't have to all of these places. In some places I get away with it fine, but other places they'll say, no, we need your license or we need your passport or blah blah blah, and there's no need for them to have any of that data, but it's just a part of their process. And I think hopefully this will begin to change some of that, and they'll talk to their lawyers or their cybersecurity firms and they'll say, guys, why are you asking for this stuff? You don't need it. You don't need their passport.
I mean, even it's like if you're signing up for a free ebook, just give them a Guerrilla Mail or a throwaway email address, and then if that doesn't work, then maybe you'll need to actually give them an actual thing. But yeah.
But I've never been called out on that kind of stuff once for giving fake names. Like, I think there's this little inbuilt part of us, I don't know if it's from our schooling or what it's from, but when you see a form and it's got first name, last name and email, the first time you ever go to put a name that isn't your own in there, it's like in your head you're thinking that, I don't know, a hand's going to reach through the screen and slap you, or the police are going to rock up at your door and knock on the door and say, sir, we've got reports that you gave a fake name for an ebook sign up. It's just not going to happen, and you don't need to be putting that kind of information out on the internet where it's probably going to be breached, and people can use that. If they get that information, they can use that against you.
So I guess you have to do a bit of mental gymnastics and be like, don't give me my real name. But then if you're using something like Chrome, which you shouldn't use, it will save your first name, last name, all these preferences. So once you've put Testy McTestison of Testville, Taiwan, postcode 11011, every time you start filling out a form, it will just suggest, why don't you be just Testy McTestison? Which is, funnily enough, the one that I
So
use.
if you want to find Joe, look up on Have I Been Pwned for Texting McTestison.
That's the one.
But speaking of Have I Been Pwned and data breaches, there was a massive dump I think it was last week, where nearly 773 million email accounts were exposed in a massive data breach.
It was known as Collection 1, and apparently the data didn't come from a single source or site or company, but it's an aggregation of cracked passwords, and that includes cracked passwords. So you can check if you've been affected on haveibeenpwned.com, and pwned spelled Pwned.
If you go over to Have I Been Pwned and you find that you have been breached, and look, it's likely that you have. A couple of my old accounts were even in there. And they don't really have a lot of information about where a lot of this stuff is attributed to yet. So it'll generally just say it's come from this part of the dump or that part of the dump. Yeah, look, if you use the same password for most things, and especially if that password involves your bank account or your credit card or any account that's important to you, go to Have I Been Pwned, check it out, and really worth changing all your passwords.
Interesting. There's a.
They were trying to do, more and more people started backing it.
From what I've heard and what I've seen is that they publish everything's really transparent. So they're doing like weekly or monthly reports, is it?
Yeah, so they do a big quarterly report. They used to do monthly reports, but I think it's a quarterly report now. But they release the timelines and essentially the agile chart, I guess, every week to say this is where we're up to with things and give percentages and all that kind of stuff. It's been really interesting being a backer of this game. Look, I backed right at the very beginning, and then I've put more money in.
You
since.
almost gave up at a point, didn't you?
I did, yeah, because it's taken so long, and they actually had a lot of frustrations with the technology. They chose an engine that seemed really good at the time, but in hindsight they probably should have used a different engine, and so they've had to basically do a complete rebuild of that engine. They've had a studio they used to do a part of the game folded, and it turned out the tech that they built just wasn't what they were meant to build. And there's just all these different things that have happened, and it's probably stuff that happens with every single game studio, but you never hear about that because it's always behind closed doors. Whereas because this has been completely out in the open, you've kind of got to see a live version of game development, but not just a live version of any game, a live version of the most ambitious game in the history of gaming. And so it's that's been really interesting, and so it has been nearly 6.5 years of development since it started, but things are really starting to come together now in a really incredible way.
It's been in open beta for a couple of years now. Alpha, sorry.
Yeah.
So it's still in alpha mode.
Still in alpha, yeah.
In progress, but there's been a lot of. I mean, I first saw gameplay when you showed me. Probably a year ago now, maybe a bit over a year ago, and it looked incredible. This is a AAA. You fly a realistic-looking spacecraft through space, and it looked amazing. Absolutely incredible planets, and you see other planets in the distance, and everything's around. But what's happened between then and now? I mean, as far as being able to play it.
Okay, so there's been the big challenges for the game have really been technological more than anything else. So the whole idea of this open universe game was that there'd be no cutscenes, for example, so that everything would be happening completely on the same server. Solar systems would be, planets would be spinning around the suns. They'd have realistic orbits that corresponded to realistic physics. Then, so they'd be gravitational pull modeled, for example. And then there'd be stations orbiting planets, and they'd have gravitational pull, and they'd all be to scale too. So there's only one solar system in Star Citizen at the moment, and there's about 40 planned. And the reason that it's taken so long is because they've taken a tech-first approach, which is why it's been such a fascinating project to watch, because they haven't cut any corners. Chris Roberts is a perfectionist in many ways, and that's part of the reason why he brought his brother on to run a studio in the UK building this game as well, because his brother's kind of the yin to his yang and kind of keeps him in check a little bit more. But Chris Roberts said at the very beginning, we want, for example, a ship. If a ship is going to fly, it should have all the components modeled within the game which make it fly. The engine should physically fire. So the pistons or whatever in the engine should actually fire. It should actually have to take on combustible liquid to fuel the engine. And there should be pipes running through the ship and electrical wiring that you could cut if you wanted to, and et cetera, et cetera.
So he's cutting no corners. He's not just getting a 3D model to move from A to B. It's a model that consists of a bunch of parts.
Yeah, and some of the problems with that were problems that you couldn't have even foreseen before they started building it. So there was this whole big issue of player models, okay? So the way that player models work in every other game is the camera's actually mounted like on the chest.
Right.
And the head is kind of just this appendage that they render in. But a lot of games, especially single player games, if you were to look back on the model, if it was a first person game, you wouldn't even see the head because they don't actually model it. And they cut a lot of corners, and they kind of cheat in the way they model the physics of these models. And you'll see it you won't see it in a lot of other games, but behind the scenes they're cheating. It's not real physics. There's all sorts of different problems with that. So Chris Roberts from the outset said, no, the camera will be in the head, the body will be modelled using physics, there'll be proper locomotion, all these other different things. But one of the big problems they faced was when they mounted the camera in the head and they built this whole physics system, and the character moved properly, the head would move. And so so in an early version of this alpha, you'd walk around and your head would be moving and everyone was getting sick.
Wow.
Because this head was bobbing from side to side. And so what every normal person would do would be say, well, okay, we just got to cheat a little bit. We just got to make the camera work. But Chris Roberts says, no, that's not enough. We need to build a mechanism like what we have in our human brains and eyes to level out this movement. So when you walk, for example, in real life, your head is kind of moving and bobbing, but you don't. Your mind kind of counterbalances that, and your vision still kind of stays the same. Mm-hmm. It doesn't make you sick, and so they built the technology for that into the game. And so now, when you move around in the game, your head doesn't move around, but it's not because they've cheated. It's because they actually made things more in depth. And that was just mirrored across the board. Like in so many different areas, there were all these different things where this vision of a completely physical simulation looked like it wasn't going to come to fruition. People were like, can you just get on with building the content of the game and stop spending all your time building this engine? But Chris Roberts' response was like, we're building a game for the next 20, 30 years. You know, when we need to get this tech right, because once we've got the foundations right, everything else will follow. And you can go look it up. They had a big issue with getting the ships to work properly in simulated gravity, because most games that have ships in them, it's kind of like on a wire. It doesn't really work the way it should. But every thruster in the game, from the small thrusters to the massive ones, all works on real physics, and it all has to fire on different degrees to move the ship around. And you can actually see that happening when you move these ships.
So what we're looking at is an architectural masterpiece, which would be a spaceship within an architectural masterpiece, which is the game, the framework for this to run on. Now, let's just look at what players can do now. Because I've seen a couple of things I'd really like to chat about, and then let's talk about where this is heading and what's possible and what this means for just games as a whole and what people will start demanding. So just first off, you showed me some clips today. I saw a couple of things. Firstly, you can fit 20 different people in. So let's say you get in a spaceship. You're on some space port that's floating around a moon or something ridiculous. You get into your spaceship, which you retrieve from the storage thing. You get in, you get 20 of your mates to get in your thing. You fly around, all your mates can walk around your thing while you're moving around this universe, and they can look out of windows, and they're actually there. And then you can get out and have a zero gravity fight on a abandoned space station with some other people, and there are chairs floating around. And tell us a bit about what you can do in this game.
Okay,
and then transform that into what's going to be possible.
So, let's take that example then. So, let's say you've got 20 people and you want to go have a 10 versus 10 fight on this zero gravity planet. So, you all spawn into the game at, there's a station that everyone spawns at the moment.
Just a quick one. What is spawning?
Spawning is kind of like appearing in the game. And if you die in the game, you'll spawn back somewhere. So, it's kind of where you appear. So, everyone would spawn in at this station, and you actually wake up in a bed when you first. So you get out of bed, and then you got to go down to the station, and you can go to the console and call your ship at the moment. And your ship is physically stored somewhere on this station, and it'll kind of shoot out of its storage and pop up onto a deck somewhere, which is really cool in and of itself. So then, let's say you've got all 20 people and they're in your organisation. So they've got organisation structures within this game already. The social features are really fleshed out, which is really cool to have. So you'd say to everyone, okay, let's meet at my constellation. So a constellation's a ship. I've got one. It's kind of like the Millennium Falcon of the Star Citizen world at the moment. So it's got a couple of turrets. It's got 3 pilot seats at the front. It's got a big cargo bay, and it's got a number of other seats. It's even got a toilet in there and a little bathroom and all sorts of different things. So you could say, okay, let's all go out to the landing pad. And so, first of all, before you went out to the landing pad, you have to make sure you had your inner suit on,
Right.
which is completely sealed, because you've got you've got oxygen, and you've got heart rate, and you've got all these other things you've got to be concerned about. And once you step outside as well, so you cycle the airlock, you walk up to the airlock, you cycle it, it'll equalize your pressure, and then you go out the other side. Sound will be a lot more muffled because you're in, or you won't even. They still model some of the sounds. They say that your suit will interpret what's going on and give you a little bit of sound, but it's just so you can actually hear something instead of nothing while you're out in complete vacuum. But you're out in complete vacuum, so you can hear yourself breathing. You can see your air tank remaining. So everyone will kind of wander over to the ship. And the other thing I should mention too is that everywhere has different levels of gravity. So some planets you go on might only have like 0.6 of a standard gravity, so Earth gravity. So if you jump out of something that would normally kill you on Earth, you might just have like a nice soft landing, like you would on the moon or something. So I think the gravity on these stations is about like 0.8 of a G or something. You'd all wander over to the ship, and then you'd lower the cargo bay, and everyone could pile in.
Wow.
Now, one of the big challenges they had was, Chris Roberts' vision was that people would be able to fly these ships around, these big ships, and people would be able to walk around in those ships while they're flying through the solar system, hurtling at a fraction of the speed of light, and there wouldn't be any difference. And that's never really been achieved before in a game, in like a real game. But yeah, this one you could. So you everyone walks in, seats go up, a couple of people can get in the turrets, other people can get in the seats, and someone gets in the pilot, and then you retract your landing gear, up you get, and you then have to put in where you want to go on your navigation, and you shoot off. And everyone can be walking around your ship while you shoot off. They can look outside, and then eventually you'll end up at one of these stations. So you spin up they call it a quantum drive, and then you fly to this station. Wow. Then what happens is you say, okay, well, everyone needs to get out. And so you can back your ship up to the back of this station, which is in vacuum. So it's been breached. There's no air left in it. And that's what this for this example, the station is. It's like a station that used to have people in it, and then pirates came and shot it up. And so the whole thing's exposed to vacuum, and everyone died. And so you can go into this station that used to be used. But then, they can open the airlock and everyone goes out, but you're then flying in 0G with your suit. So your suits have these little thrusters on them that fire for the different directions you want to go in. And you could set, people up on one side of the station, team of 10 on one side of the station, team of 10 on the other side of the station, and you could all duke it out. But when you're in 0G, as you saw when you watched this video, it's not just the bottom angles you've got to worry about, it's all the different angles.
So when you go around a corner, don't look at the floor, look everywhere.
Yeah, and they've modeled, so this is a thing, like you can get in a spaceship and fly it with your joystick and do all the crazy spaceship things, but then you jump out and you're in a fully modeled first person shoot 'em up with guns and med packs, and if you can get breached and you can lose air and all this sort of thing.
So is there anything so if I'm just like flying my jets around, can you fight with other spacecraft?
Definitely. Yeah, and that was the first mode that they ever released was the dogfighting mode. And yeah, there's all sorts of different spacecraft you can fight with. The Gs are fully realistic as well. So if you pull too many lateral Gs, or is it? Yeah, I think it's lateral Gs are the worst ones. Let's say you get up to like 7 or 8 Gs, your vision will start to blur.
Wow.
If you and that's like if you turn too tight of a corner or something. If you continue to pull those Gs, you'll black out.
Wow.
And it's modelled the effect of the Gs on the human body, and so you got to be really careful when you're dogfighting that you don't try and do too much, or you'll black out.
Wow. So this game is not designed for you to just play by yourself. I mean, there is a single player element that I've seen that's almost maybe a separate thing to that.
Yeah, there's a campaign that they're going to release called Squadron 42, and they got Mark Hamill back and a bunch of other people back, some quite famous actors actually, to do motion capture.
Right.
And because one of the things in this game that they've done is that you can actually turn your webcam on and your character's face will mimic what you're doing on your face. So they've set up mocap technology on it, but they're going to use that for the campaign as well. And you can go and watch some trailers now of some of these people like giving a speech for example, and it might be Mark Hamill's voice and his facial expressions, but they've modelled it on a different character.
Wow.
And the graphics too are just beautiful. You saw some of them in this clip.
Beautiful planets in the background. You fly towards a planet, you see craters, and then there's so much detail that comes up, and then you land a bunch of spaceships, and all the spaceships they're not just pristine models, they've got some dirt or some, it doesn't look like some fresh 3D model, and then they have their lights pulsing when they're parked, and all kinds of things.
And you actually saw it, you watched it go from night to day on one of the videos that we were watching.
Insane. And this is on one planet in a massive system. Is there VR support?
There's rudimentary VR support. I think it's not officially supported yet, but that's completely planned down the line.
So it looks like this game is built for you being with your mates and going around this solar system. What kind of economics is there? What kind of stuff is there to do as a team? And what is the plan for those teams as well? Because I saw some stuff about mining companies on there, but I have no idea. What is this all about?
So you can actually mine now. There's a ship that will let you mine. You can go find some asteroids, and there's a bunch of asteroids in this system, and there will be more in the bigger game as well. But you can mine for resources. You cut chunks out of these rocks, and you can find different resources, and there's a whole system for that they're building. And then you'll be able to sell that. I think that there's a rudimentary commodities market at the moment, but it'll be fully fledged by the time the game comes out. There's all sorts of different missions they've put in there now. So there's delivery missions, you hunt down criminals, you clear out stations, there's all sorts of different things that they've got. And then I think there's even some exploration missions in there too. And you can take people on your ship. A lot of the really interesting stuff I've been seeing recently is from a couple of streamers who are setting up basically like 50, 60 man engagements with all sorts of different types of ships. And Joe's actually bringing up one of those ships right now on the screen, which is called a Hammerhead, which is I think the biggest ship in the game at the moment, which has a bunch of turrets on it. It fits a whole bunch of people, and you can have everyone essentially walking around this massive capital ship while it's flying.
Sheesh. And then you showed me this massive one. Is that the...
That's a different one there. That's the Idris, which is like a proper capital ship.
And so that's something that's in development. So it looks like they're going to be massive organizations and clans that are going to end up appearing and warring and having economies and stuff. How big was that big ship? Because this is all going to be real stuff that you can use in game with hundreds of people. Yeah,
that big one is hundreds of meters long. And a number of decks high. You can fit a whole bunch of smaller ships in it. And that was the big technological challenge they had to surmount in making the game. And they're almost there. And it's why they focus on tech first, is that to have, say, 100 people on a ship shooting through space, and to have the ship, if you're flying past it and, you're 1,000 meters away, you have to see that ship shooting past. But the engine has to be able to handle not only those two ships shooting past each other at a fraction of the speed of light and rendering them to each other, but it also has to keep all those people walking around on that ship localized to that ship, and essentially have them having their own experiences, and it'll feel like they're just on it, because to them it'll feel like they're stationary, because that's what it feels like when you're traveling like on a train at 150 kilometers an hour. You don't feel like you're you can't feel the wind whipping your hair, and you don't feel like you're flying through the air. You just feel like it's almost like you're on nothing. It's almost like you're just stationary, because your velocity is relative to that vehicle. And so they've had to render all that on a big scale, and have people that come close, have that all work flawlessly with no loading screens. And it's just, people said they weren't going to be able to do it. There are a number of people that said there is no way you can do this on a multiplayer game running on the internet. There's just no way. And they're using this technology called Amazon Lumberyard, and I think they're also using something called object container streaming from Amazon. And it wasn't really designed for what they're using it to do now, but it's at the point now where it's actually starting to work.
So they're using cloud services from, whether it's Amazon and to support massive amounts of users.
Yeah.
And because this is people all around the world.
Yeah.
Can be jumping in on this, or how does that sort of work?
Yeah, yes. I think at the moment there's 3 different regions. There's US, Europe, and Australia.
Right, that makes sense.
I think the eventual intention is to try and amalgamate them as much as they can and just have kind of localized areas and work the pings out somehow. But that's still a fair way off. But their goal is to have basically unlimited people in the region without it lagging everywhere and struggling like you see with most games. That's what happens. And the goal with using Amazon, who are essentially at the forefront of server technology, was that was their best bet to work with. And they've done a lot of the work themselves, but that was the best bet for them to work with to get this to work. And you can watch videos now where they've got 60, 70 people in the same place and there's minimal lag, minimal rubber banding, all that kind of stuff. And the render distances are incredible. So they really are building something that is designed to be a complete world.
It's absolutely insane. I mean, it's such a technological challenge, and it's just the right sort of people to be building it, because it's people who aren't cutting corners to try and work to budgets.
Yeah.
Well, obviously they have to work to budgets, but I mean, they've got, it's a massive world. There's massive maps. There's galaxies. There's all kinds of things, planets spinning around other things and other things spinning around.
Even
that.
the orbital mechanics, like they've made sure that they built the orbital mechanics from the ground up to be completely accurate, which is just incredible. And at the moment you can only visit one system, but what they've actually done, and this is just across the board, they take this approach. They said, okay, we could spend a whole bunch of time building, say, 40 systems, or we could spend a little less time building and we could handcraft them, or we could spend a little bit less time, build 40 systems, or a bunch more doing like what No Man's Sky or Elite Dangerous did, which is kind of like do procedural generation, but everything's kind of a little bit samey once you go to a few things, and it's not, the planets aren't that big, and it's not that special. But they've taken this kind of hybrid approach where they're building a huge amount of assets, and they're actually building algorithms and programming them as much as they can to work out what sensible architecture and structure of building looks like. So like how does a small town work? How does a small settlement work?
So it's like you don't have 2 hospitals next to each other? Or
and like a train. So there's a city now called Louisville in the game, or I think it's a planet, but they've got a landing zone there now where there's a complete subway system which they've procedurally generated through the city.
So that means very little human input.
Very little human input. They've still done some human input into that particular system because it's the first one, but their goal is to essentially set a whole number of parameters and then have the computer generate something unique but sensible in the parameters they've given it. And then they can just kind of go in and edit what they need to edit.
So you've got real life players. You and I can jump into this game. Are there other characters? Because it's such a big world, it'd be very boring if there's only a couple hundred people playing.
Yes, they partnered with, and I'm blanking on the name at the moment, a company who's specialized in building an AI.
Wow.
So AI intelligence. And they essentially said that we want you to use your technology to help build our AI. But similar to everything else we're doing, we want you to build that from the ground up. We want you to build an AI that understands all these different commands, kind of like almost like its purpose in a way, and train it for the next few years while we build the rest of the game to get to a point where when the time comes we can roll out a whole bunch of different NPCs and have them respond to their environment, have them respond to whatever roles need to be in a community and all this kind of stuff. And so their goal is to have AI crew, for example. So if I wanted to take my Constellation out, which I think is like a 4 to 7 person ship with a whole bunch of cargo, I could go to the bar on a planet, like kind of like what Luke and Obi-Wan do in Star Wars, and say we need a crew. I got a ship, need a crew, and you could hire NPCs to come on that crew and do different jobs for you, and they would act quite reasonably. They'd kind of do what you need them to do, and you'd pay them and all that kind of thing. And they are beginning to populate a lot of the world now with NPCs, but they're still teaching them a lot of the stuff. So they're not there yet. Each different system will have its own market. They've accounted for like the realities of space travel. They will have these like gates which you can travel between systems in.
Right.
But the communications, essentially you'll have to have like a ship that goes from one system to another and then broadcasts like all the news and all the new messages.
What?
And then to send a response, it'll have to go from that one. It'll have to wait. First of all, we'll have to wait for light speed to send the messages out to where they need to be, and then wait for the returns, which could take an hour or two. And then it'll have to jump back through that system into the other system and then send the transmission back out into that one.
Wow.
So, yeah, they're kind of saying if news breaks somewhere in one system or if an event happens, it'll take a while for it to filter out to all the other systems because it's got to, account for light speed. It's got to account for jumping through these things. And yeah.
Mate, this thing looks enormous. Like, I'm just looking at the economic concept of this. So it looks like to me this game is being built for at least it's going to be, from what I'm seeing, it looks like it's going to be the game that a lot of the space simulator fans are going to be playing for the next decade or two.
Yeah, and
decade easily.
And I dare say it's going to be the game that a lot of other genre fans play for the next decade or two as well, because the FPS, the first-person shooting element of this game is unlike anything else you'll ever play, and it's better. Like, it's more realistic. The zero-G stuff's incredible, but the fact that these orgs are going to be able to like drop hundreds of troops at once on planet-wide battlefields, and so I haven't even got. There's so much I haven't even gone into, but they've already got modular habitation which you can set up now on planets, and the goal of that is to eventually expand that system into being able to set up small settlements. Organizations will be able to set up their own headquarters on asteroids, planets, whatever else, and down the track you'll be able to attack them and loot them and all sorts of different. So the scope of what's going to be possible is incredible, because then you've got the economic system. The level of immersion and detail in this as well makes me suspect that a number of our real world use cases for like VR technology, for example, may spring from this game simply because of the degree of detail they're building this game in, the economy this game is going to have, the level of detail, everything. So yeah, the scope of it is just breathtaking.
It feels like a cult classic that hasn't been released. I mean, I'm seeing this diagram of the economy. You've got the population node. They need food, water, building materials. They feed out workers so they can work in, mines or other sort of things. And then machinery is needed for the mines. Mines make ore, machinery and ore go into these refineries. That builds other things. Factories make widgets. And that's just for making widgets.
And that's a chart. So at each stage of that, you would have NPCs sending out missions to players to bring that equipment to them to fulfill the different chunks. So it's their goal with that is to have essentially emergent and non-linear mission giving.
Hydrocarbons, ores, magnetics, you got circuits, processes, all kinds of massive concepts.
Yeah, I'd recommend for anyone that is curious about any of this stuff, go on the Star Citizen website. We'll put the link in the show notes. And there's also a wiki and a tools, which we'll put in as well. There is a breathtaking amount of information for this game on their website, on their wiki. There's been so much material released. This is the beauty of having a crowdfunded game, is that they've been accountable to the community from the very beginning, and they've been releasing all sorts of material to the community from the very beginning.
And the exciting thing is you can watch and see what we're talking about right now. Go on YouTube, search Star Citizen, and if your jaw doesn't drop with the capability of these graphics, then you're probably a gamer already. But even then, it's such a marvel to see what's being built.
Yeah. And so it is available to play now. You can get in the game for, I think, it's about $45. But we'll put a referral code in the game. I think you get a discount with the code. It'll be one of our codes, so you can support us a little bit as well if you use that. But we're probably going to begin doing an event or something in this every now and then. So if you want to play with us, definitely let us know, because we will be playing this a bit.
So that's Star Citizen. Incredible potential, so much that there is there, and we're sort of not doing justice to the years that you've been watching this for keenly, but really exciting stuff.
Yeah, and it's playable now. That's the thing. There is so much you can do now, and I mean, I got it. I got it running on Linux a few days ago as well. So I'm now. It shouldn't really run on it yet because I haven't really done any work on it, but yeah, they've built it that well that it can run on a system it's not specifically designed for just yet. So I could talk for hours about this game, and Joe's got a video playing right now of some new gameplay footage they brought out of one of the different landing zones, but there is so much of that around. There's a wealth of stuff out there. I'd recommend go checking it out if you're at all interested in technology. Even if you're not interested in gaming, the technological feat that this game represents is just incredible.
Star Citizen.
It's
impossible though. What they're building.
That was the thing, man. Because I was like, maybe when I'm 40. But their goal is to make it as immersive as they possibly can.
Can you take a glass of whiskey onto a spaceship though? That's the question.
Oh, I reckon you could stock your cabinet with. Oh man, I'm so stoked that you're excited about it,
mate. We're buying it.
I've been so excited about this for so long.
The thing is, I can't shell out money for something that's not, like Battlefield V. I only play Battlefield, but I can't buy that game.
Yeah,
because I'm just not going to get. Well, I am going to get $50 out of value out of it, but it's just not. It's not what I need.
Yeah. Yeah, whereas this...
I need...
This, this is more than you get in most games already. And it's just in alpha.
So we get all the boys.
Yes.
We're all sitting at home in our own individual homes.
Yeah.
One of us is in VR.
Yep.
And then we all just have a bit of whiskey, jump on a spaceship and get into a space crash.
Go raid a station or go... track down a fugitive,
the
or
amount
we go have a battle
is going to be insane.
Dude,
there's going to be so many.
Imagine having 2 people in a turret, or have 2 people in separate ships following us. Or
JK on the turrets.
Somewhere. Yeah, man, it's just.
Yeah, he'd be on a little space motorbike, wouldn't he?
Yeah,
mate, it would be so good.
Yeah, man,
mate. Anyway,
we gotta play some Star Citizen then.
Wherever you're joining us from, pleasure having you here. Why not drop into our Telegram channel to say hello? It's FOMO.show/Telegram.
So quick privacy and security segment this week. We just wanted to talk a little bit about camera covers, and we thought it was a pertinent time to talk about this because both Joe and I now have covers on all of our cameras. So on our phone, on our laptops, and on any webcams we've got.
So yeah, you can buy them off eBay, Amazon, or for just a couple dollars. It costs more in postage than it will in the actual thing.
Yeah,
it's a little slider that you stick over your mobile phone or laptop camera, and it just covers the selfie cam just when and you can uncover it when you need it. You just slide it open, and it's just nice to be able to retake that bit of control over your mobile phone.
Yeah, I got to admit, whenever I looked at my phone, I didn't want to put a tape over it because then it gets all sticky. See, some people stick tape over their cameras and then it gets all sticky and it's just annoying and it doesn't look very good. But whenever I looked at my phone, I'd always feel a little bit weird because the camera was staring back at me. And if that doesn't weird you out, go watch the movie Snowden, because it'll weird you out after that when you find out what most intelligence agencies, the level of access they have to your phones and to your other bits of hardware. It's just nice to have something physical that actually covers the camera. And the good thing about these little flippy things is that it's as easy as just pulling your thumb across it, and you can use a selfie camera. Let's say you want to take a selfie or whatever, but then you just flip it back and you're done. You don't have to worry about it.
So peace of mind for $2 or £1.27.
Yeah, so I think we put a link in the show notes to one of them. It's kind of hard to... I'm sure we can find one to put in the show notes. So we'll put something in the show notes.
And yeah, on my laptop, I just use... Because I never use a camera on that, and I don't even want to Skype people on there. So on my laptop, yeah, I just have a piece of cardboard taped on it. But yeah, mobile phones, these little sliders.
I've got one on my laptop, and it blends in too, so you don't even notice it.
Yeah.
But yeah, it just clicks across.
I was seeing yours, and then I kept seeing them around the office, and then decided to get some laser engraved with our company logo. And we just ordered 100 from China.
Yours is branded. That's great for a cybersecurity firm. That's really good too.
Right, yeah, we'll get there. But yeah, exciting.
Awesome. We are looking for ideas for topics
that you'd like to hear about.
Yeah, we just want to put the call out this year to, if there's something you really want to hear us talk about or circle back around to that we talked about earlier, do let us know because we will try and cover it this year on the show.
Yeah, jump into our Telegram. If you're excited about something that we've never heard of or you're really excited about, just send it to us. Future news, any of that, ping it over. If you know someone who might enjoy the show, why not share it with them? You can find us at FOMO.show.
You can jump on our Telegram at FOMO.show/Telegram.
You can follow us on Twitter at _FOMO_show.
And YouTube at FOMO.show/YouTube. That's it for us here at the FOMO Show. Thank you so much for joining us. If you like our show, please do feel free to subscribe in your podcast app of choice or via our YouTube channel. I'm Matt.
And I'm Joe.
And as always, remember,
no FOMO. Discovered no-dose. So you know how
so you've stopped energy drinks.
I've come off energy drinks fully. I discovered that you can get a pill that delivers the same amount of caffeine as a coffee, but it's so good.
Oh, dude, don't. Yeah, people can get real whacked out on that stuff.
So I just realised YouTube have been completely neglected because my computer's been packed until yesterday. I haven't been able to render the videos.
Yeah.
So if you listen or whatever on YouTube, I'm so sorry. It's going to be a while until you get the next one. But
you're listening to the past in the future.
Oh, now I've just completely screwed up. Yeah, I'm sorry, guys.
What do you reckon of that?
It's nice.
Yeah,
very
it's good,
tasty.
eh?
What's this? Captain
That's a rum.
Morgan.
So it's private stock.
Oh, is this the one you got in Japan, mate? You should not have poured me this.
Nah, man.
I feel like I'm.
No, it's
Mate.
good. It wasn't a lot anyway. But you don't need a lot. Like you can sip it, and it's just got so many flavors.
You can smell it, and it's like a Christmas cake. You wouldn't want to cook a Christmas cake with this, though.
No, you would. It'd be a very happy Christmas.
Yeah. So I reckon there need to be tools that show, firstly, laws for countries. I've talked about this before, but laws need to be visible so you can see all the laws in one place without having to click open PDFs or click through web pages and they need to be in plain English so you can see them in these like spider diagrams that go off so you get energy and you can see energy. Whatever, I don't care. I'm pipe dreaming here. But also, another idea.
I'm just thinking of all the work that it'd be.
Oh, it's way too much. That's why it'd have to be crowdfunded.
I've been going through the Corps Act today for like securities, process for security, and it's just the Corps Act is a dark, dark place. You do not want to go there.
Hey, this is the problem. It's so complicated.
Oh, so complicated.
But yeah, so there's that. So you can see references pointing to different things. You can click through and like explore, and you can have it in VR, all kinds of things.
Yeah.
Anyway, so you need that, and it would have to be crowdsourced because no one could do that alone. But you could start it and build the mechanisms for it. That's one thing. The second thing was all government organizational charts should be online, and the individual workers can be anonymized. That's fine. But the manager of teams has to be publicly known.
Why?
Why? Because they're a public servant. And the public pays for them.
Yes.
And if not, at least knowing the organisational charts for the government, so people can actually see, wow, there are 930 politicians.
Yep.
Wow, there are 6,000 people working in research that we're all paying you for.
Yeah.
That is, US government shutdown shows the same thing, right?
Oh,
you know, there's
we got to talk about this. We got to talk about this shutdown.
Oh, do
Don't
we?
No, we do because.
Yeah.
Yeah. You don't want to.
Nah. It's too much politics, but it's.
But doesn't it show that things just keep moving on?
Yeah, it's like Brexit.
Yeah, you know, like
we're gonna still breathe air and drink water.
Was it you sent me that article?
Yeah, the Trojan horse thing with
it's
kind of cool, kind of cool. But that gave me the idea that we actually need to know how big each department is.
Yep.
And then also on that, you know, when you've got like diagrams of like organizational trees.
Yeah.
Like showing the funding in there as well, so you can this is like so we can like the people can actually spot corruption and actually voice it, because we don't have the tools to see what's going on, so we can't actually legitimately raise concerns about our government, which we can't even see.
Yeah, because our government isn't just the politicians; it's all the people that work for it. Yeah.
So we need to know where the money's going and what the value they're doing is.
Yeah.
You want to know. I want to know how many firemen are there, how many nurses are there. It's not up to me to say we need more or less, but it'd be good to know.
Yes. It'd be good to know what positions are out there
Yeah.
and what departments are out there and what task force.
What does the government look like?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
And then
I
we'll
didn't
find
even
all
know.
these bods who didn't even know they, no one else in the government knew that they were even there.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I didn't even know that, like, there's 3 or 4 buildings in Brisbane which just look like general corporate buildings full of government. Full of it.
Mate.
And it's like, well, what's going on in there?
And you work a third of your year. You don't even know where it's going.
That's right.
I would be more happy to pay tax if I knew where it was going.
That's right.
Well, I wouldn't be happy. But I
And
would,
how much is going to different places.
yeah, and I would be fuming, and people would be fuming, and we would do something about it.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's a problem that I'm putting out into the universe that I want solved. Where are my tax dollars going, and how many people can I bomb for that? Chemistry that makes them stick to the target analyte, which form clusters. So the higher the target analyte.
We're going to have some great
What about?
Generally about 10% larger than the standard, like the area of a standard mic, which is essentially about 10%.
The bloopers.
Science.
Explaining science.
Science, eh? Let's try this again.
Delivery drones are using bird-inspired legs to jump into the air. Matt and I are going to watch the video of the takeoff.
Yeah, look at that. Imagine a big, like, imagine that, but like scaled up.
Full of people. Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain. Secure your belts for takeoff.
Have you watched The Expanse?
There's so many references I just don't have.
You gotta watch The Expanse.